They laughed when the 60-year-old school janitor signed up for the police tactical training course, a man who could barely lift the equipment bag over his shoulder. For 2 weeks, they mocked him at every drill, called him Grandpa, and suggested he stick to mopping floors. The ridicule continued until the day an FBI instructor noticed the faded tattoo on his wrist and realized he was looking at a Delta Force operator who had completed missions that were still classified 30 years later. Welcome to Secrets Never Told. Before we begin this powerful story of hidden expertise and unexpected recognition, tell me in the comments from which city in the world are you watching this video today. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, hit that subscribe button and help us honor those who served in ways we never knew. The Riverside County Sheriff's Department training facility buzzed with activity on a crisp October morning. Recruits moved between obstacle courses and tactical simulations, their uniforms pristine, their confidence evident in every step. The academy prided itself on producing elite law enforcement officers, and the standards reflected that ambition. Standing awkwardly near the equipment shed, Harold "Hal" Morrison looked completely out of place. At 60 years old, with graying hair and a slight stoop from decades of custodial work, he clutched the enrollment paperwork with weathered hands. His application had been approved through the department's Community Outreach Program, an initiative designed to bridge gaps between law enforcement and civilian populations. "You sure you're in the right place, Pops?" called out Officer Jake Martinez, a 28-year-old academy instructor with military bearing and zero patience for what he perceived as political correctness gone wrong. "The senior center's about 5 miles that way." A ripple of laughter spread through the assembled recruits. Morrison didn't respond, instead focusing on adjusting the tactical vest that hung loosely on his slight frame. The equipment weighed nearly 40 pounds, almost a quarter of his body weight. Sergeant Lisa Rodriguez, the lead instructor, emerged from the main building with a clipboard and barely concealed irritation. The Community Outreach Program was a department mandate she'd opposed from the beginning, and Morrison represented everything she considered problematic about lowered standards. "Morrison," she called sharply, "you're assigned to Blue Team. Try to keep up." The morning's first exercise involved basic weapon familiarization. Recruits lined up at the firing range, each assigned an M4 carbine and given instruction on proper handling. Morrison struggled with the rifle's weight, his movements uncertain as he attempted to mirror the instructor's demonstrations. "Jesus Christ," muttered Deputy Frank Coleman, a recently graduated officer who'd volunteered to assist with training. "This is embarrassing. Who approved this?" Morrison's first attempts at marksmanship were mediocre at best. His groupings were scattered, his stance unstable. The younger recruits exchanged glances that ranged from amusement to outright contempt. "Maybe we should get you a BB gun, Grandpa," suggested recruit Tommy Patterson, earning chuckles from his peers. "Something more your speed." The physical training portion proved even more challenging. Morrison lagged behind during runs, struggled with obstacle courses, and required assistance with equipment he couldn't lift unassisted. By the end of the first day, he'd become a source of entertainment for instructors and recruits alike. "I give him 3 days, Rodriguez told Martinez as they watched Morrison slowly pack his equipment. "Maybe less." Day 2 brought urban warfare simulations. Recruits navigated mock building clearances, practiced room-to-room tactics, and learned close-quarters combat techniques. Morrison moved through scenarios with painful slowness, often arriving at objectives long after his teammates had completed them. "You're compromising team safety," Martinez informed him after one particularly slow building clearance. "In the real world, hesitation gets people killed." Morrison nodded without argument, accepting the criticism with the same quiet resignation he'd shown throughout his custodial career. He'd spent 35 years cleaning Riverside Elementary School, arriving before dawn and leaving after dusk, largely invisible to the students and staff whose lives he quietly supported. The mockery intensified during tactical equipment training. Modern police gear required familiarity with complex systems, body armor with integrated communications, night vision equipment, and specialized weapons platforms. Morrison's unfamiliarity with technology became another source of amusement. "How'd this guy even fill out the application?" asked recruit Sarah Chen. "Probably had his grandkid help him with the computer." By week 2, Morrison had become the Academy's unofficial mascot, a living example of misguided inclusion policies. Instructors used his struggles as teaching moments about fitness standards and mental preparation. Recruits began placing bets on when he'd finally quit. The transformation began subtly during week 3's night operations training. The exercise involved navigating a darkened obstacle course using only star starlight and basic night vision equipment. Most recruits struggled with the disorientation, bumping into barriers and losing their way in the artificial darkness. Morrison moved differently in the dark. His steps became more confident, his navigation more precise. He completed the course in respectable time, though few noticed amid their own struggles with the challenging conditions. Deputy Coleman, monitoring the exercise through thermal imaging, frowned at his readings. "Rodriguez, you seeing this?" "Seeing what?" "Morrison's heat signature. Look at his movement pattern." Rodriguez studied the thermal display. Morrison's path through the obstacle course showed none of the erratic movement typical of disoriented trainees. Instead, he moved with deliberate efficiency, avoiding obstacles and finding optimal routes with unusual precision. "Probably luck," she dismissed. "Even a broken clock's right twice a day." The breakthrough came during an unannounced night exercise designed to test recruits' ability to handle unexpected tactical situations. The scenario involved armed intruders in a school environment, deliberately chosen for its psychological complexity and high stress potential. At 0200 hours, academy sirens wailed. Recruits scrambled from their dormitory bunks, struggling into equipment and trying to remember their training. The exercise simulated an active shooter situation, with role-playing instructors representing threats scattered throughout a mock school building. Most recruits approached the simulation with textbook tactics learned in classroom sessions. They moved cautiously, communicated constantly, and followed established protocols with varying degrees of success. Morrison approached the scenario differently. While others grouped up and advanced methodically, he disappeared into the building's ventilation and maintenance areas, spaces most recruits didn't even know existed. 20 minutes into the exercise, something unprecedented happened. Role-playing instructors began going offline, declared neutralized by an unseen participant who struck with surgical precision and vanished before backup could respond. "What the hell is happening out there?" Rodriguez demanded from the command center. "Someone's picking off our role players one by one," reported Coleman, monitoring radio traffic. "They're not following any of the tactics we taught them." Through building surveillance cameras, they watched Morrison emerge from shadows like a ghost. His movements bore no resemblance to the uncertain fumbling they'd observed during daylight training. He moved with fluid efficiency, using building infrastructure and architectural features with expertise that suggested intimate familiarity with tactical environments. "Is that Morrison?" Rodriguez stared at the surveillance monitor in disbelief. The old janitor had transformed. Gone was the hesitant uncertainty that had defined his first 3 weeks. In its place moved someone who understood building layouts intuitively, who anticipated threat positioning with uncanny accuracy, and who neutralized opposition with techniques not taught in any law enforcement manual. Within 40 minutes, Morrison had single-handedly eliminated every role-playing instructor in the building. The exercise, designed to challenge entire recruit teams, had been dominated by the 60-year-old man they dismissed as incompetent. The debriefing room fell silent as instructors processed what they'd witnessed. Morrison sat quietly in the back, his expression unchanged from the mild concentration he'd shown throughout training. "Morrison," Rodriguez called, her voice lacking its usual authority. "How did you accomplish what just happened?" "I used building maintenance areas to avoid detection and achieve tactical advantage," he replied simply. "Most people don't notice service corridors and ventilation spaces." Martinez leaned forward. "That wasn't standard building knowledge. You moved like you'd trained in that environment before." Morrison was quiet for a moment. "I've cleaned a lot of buildings. You learn the layout." But FBI instructor Agent David Park, recently assigned to the academy as part of federal training coordination, had been studying Morrison with growing recognition. Something about the man's movement patterns during the night exercise had triggered memories of classified briefings from his early career. After the debriefing, Park approached Morrison privately. "Can I see your wrist?" he asked quietly. Morrison hesitated, then rolled up his sleeve. There, faded but unmistakable to someone who knew what to look for, was a small tattoo. Not flashy artwork, but a simple designation. A triangle containing the number 1 with wings. The original Delta Force unit insignia from the 1980s. Park's breath caught. "First Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta. Original unit." Morrison's expression didn't change, but Park noticed the slight tension around his eye, the look of someone whose carefully maintained cover had been penetrated. "I think you have me confused with someone else," Morrison said evenly. "No, sir, I don't think I do." Park's voice carried new respect. "That's not a tattoo you get at a parlor. That's something you earn." Word spread quietly through the instructor staff over the following days. Park had made discreet inquiries through FBI channels, accessing classified personnel databases that revealed fragments of Morrison's real history. Harold Morrison had indeed spent 35 years as a school custodian, but before that, from 1982 to 1987, he'd served with the Army's most elite elite counter-terrorism unit. The records were heavily redacted, but they painted a picture of operations in Central America, the Middle East, and locations that remained classified decades later. The revelation recontextualized everything the Academy had witnessed. Morrison's apparent physical limitations weren't signs of weakness, but the natural effects of age on a body that had once operated at superhuman levels. His unfamiliarity with modern police equipment reflected 30 years away from tactical operations, not incompetence. Most significantly, his transformation during night operations wasn't beginner's luck. It was muscle memory from classified missions where failure meant death and success was never acknowledged. Rodriguez found herself reassessing every interaction with Morrison. His quiet acceptance of mockery wasn't weakness but discipline, honed in environments where ego could compromise missions. His methodical approach to learning reflected professional habits developed in units where perfection was the minimum acceptable standard. "Sir," Martinez approached Morrison during the following week's training. "I owe you an apology." Morrison paused in his equipment preparation. "No apology necessary, Deputy Martinez." "Yes, sir, there is. We judged you without knowing who you were." "You judged an old janitor who couldn't keep up with police academy training," Morrison replied mildly. That judgment was accurate. Martinez struggled with the response. "But you're not just an old janitor." "That's exactly what I am," Morrison said firmly. "What I was before doesn't change what I am now." Agent Park had a different perspective. During a private conversation, he pressed Morrison about his service record. "Why join a police academy at 60? Why put yourself through this?" Morrison was quiet for several minutes. Finally, he spoke with more openness than he'd shown previously. "I spent 5 years doing things that can't be discussed with people who can't understand them. Then I spent 35 years cleaning schools, watching kids grow up safe, because people like us did those things." He paused, adjusting equipment with practiced precision. "The world's getting dangerous again. Not like it was in the 80s, but dangerous in new ways. Local law enforcement is the front line now, and they need to be ready for threats they don't understand yet." Park began to grasp Morrison's motivation. "You're not here to prove anything. You're here to help prepare them." "I'm here to learn modern policing so I can do my job better," Morrison corrected. "But if my experience helps others prepare for things they haven't seen yet, that's useful." The Academy's atmosphere shifted subtly over the following weeks. Morrison remained physically limited by age, but his insights during tactical discussions proved invaluable. He offered perspectives on urban warfare, counter-terrorism operations, and threat assessment that supplemented the curriculum with real-world experience. Recruits who had mocked him began asking questions, not about his classified service. He made it clear those subjects were off-limits, but about tactical thinking, situational awareness, and the mental preparation necessary for high-stress operations. "How do you stay calm when everything's falling apart?" asked Recruit Patterson during a break between exercises. Morrison considered the question. "You accept that some situations can't be controlled. You focus on the parts you can influence and do your job regardless of circumstances. But how do you know what to focus on? Experience, training, and understanding that your mission is bigger than your comfort." These conversations gradually transformed Morrison's relationship with the Academy. He remained the 60-year-old custodian struggling with physical requirements, but he also became an unofficial mentor whose insights carried weight earned through experiences none of them could imagine. Rodriguez found herself seeking his input on training scenarios. "Morrison, you've seen urban warfare operations. How would you modify this exercise to better prepare recruits for real threats?" His suggestions were practical and precise, often identifying vulnerabilities in standard tactical approaches that reflected knowledge gained in environments where mistakes were fatal. The final Academy exercise involved a complex multi-threat scenario designed to test everything recruits had learned. Multiple role-playing adversaries, civilian populations, and environmental challenges combined to create maximum stress and confusion. Morrison's performance was adequate by Academy standards. He completed objectives, followed protocols, and demonstrated competency in required skills. But instructors watching carefully saw something else. A man deliberately containing capabilities that would have dominated the exercise if fully deployed. During the graduation ceremony, Morrison sat with other successful recruits, receiving his certificate with the same quiet dignity he'd maintained throughout training. His family attended, a daughter and 2 grandchildren who knew only that Grandpa had decided to become a police officer in his retirement. Agent Park spoke at the graduation, addressing the class about service and dedication. His eyes lingered on Morrison as he discussed the different forms heroism could take. Some heroes wear their achievements openly, openly, Park said. Others carry their service quietly, continuing to serve long after their original mission has ended. Both forms of dedication deserve our respect. After the ceremony, Morrison prepared to begin his assignment as a community liaison officer, a position that would utilize his unique background in building relationships between law enforcement and civilian populations. Sir, Rodriguez approached him privately. I learned something from having you in my academy. Morrison waited quietly. I learned that assumptions about capability based on appearance are dangerous. In law enforcement, that could get people killed. That's a valuable lesson for any officer, Morrison agreed. What will you do now? Community liaison seems like underutilizing your experience. Morrison smiled slightly, the first genuine expression of humor he'd shown during training. Agent Rodriguez, I spent 5 years conducting classified operations that officially never happened. Then I spent 35 years cleaning schools, keeping kids safe in the most basic way possible. He paused, adjusting his new badge with the same careful precision he'd once applied to much deadlier equipment. Now, I'll spend whatever time I have left helping local law enforcement understand threats they haven't seen yet. Service takes different forms, but the mission stays the same. As Morrison walked away, Rodriguez understood that she'd witnessed something rare. A warrior who had successfully transitioned from secret warfare to quiet service, never seeking recognition for capabilities that remained hidden beneath the surface. The Academy's newest graduate drove home in his modest sedan, radio tuned to classical music, looking like any other retiree starting a second career. The faded tattoo on his wrist remained covered by his sleeve, its significance known only to those with clearance to access records that would remain classified for decades to come. Behind him, the Academy continued its mission of training law enforcement officers for an increasingly complex world. But now the training included perspectives gained from someone who had faced similar complexity in environments where failure meant more than career disappointment. Harold Morrison had served his country in shadows and silence. Now he would serve his community with the same dedication, carrying knowledge that could protect lives while maintaining the discretion that had defined his entire career. Some stories of service are written in medals and monuments. Others are carried quietly by individuals who understand that the greatest victories often remain unacknowledged. Morrison's story belonged to the second category, and he wouldn't have wanted it any other way. Harold Morrison had served his country in shadows and silence. Now he would serve his community with the same dedication, carrying knowledge that could protect lives while maintaining the discretion that had defined his entire career. Some stories of service are written in medals and monuments. Others are carried quietly by individuals who understand that the greatest victories often remain unacknowledged. Morrison's story belonged to the second category, and he wouldn't have wanted it any other way. The old janitor continued his rounds at Riverside Elementary, arriving before dawn as he had for 35 years. But now he also served as a bridge between worlds, translating hard-won experience into practical wisdom that could save lives in an increasingly dangerous world. His Delta Force tattoo remained hidden beneath his sleeve, a reminder of missions that would never be declassified. But the skills those missions had forged lived on, quietly protecting a new generation through knowledge passed along in police academies and community centers where few understood the true depth of what they were receiving. Morrison had learned long ago that the most important battles are often fought by people whose names never appear in history books. Heroes who measure success not in recognition received, but in lives protected through quiet competence and unwavering dedication. 3 months after graduation, Morrison received an unexpected visitor at the elementary school. Agent Park stood in the hallway after hours, watching the former Delta Force operator methodically clean classroom floors with the same precision he'd once applied to classified operations. Sir, I have a proposition, Park said without preamble. The Bureau is developing a new training program for counterterrorism operations in civilian environments. We need someone with your unique background. Morrison paused in his mopping, considering the request. I'm retired from that life, Agent Park. I have responsibilities here. This wouldn't replace your current position. It would supplement it. Weekend consulting, helping train agents to think like operators in environments they don't understand. Morrison resumed his cleaning, but Park could see he was processing the offer. After several minutes of silence, the older man spoke. Schools are soft targets now. Shopping mall, community centers. The enemy has changed tactics, but law enforcement still thinks like they're fighting conventional crimes. Exactly why we need your perspective. You've seen how asymmetric warfare evolved. You understand how ordinary spaces become battlegrounds. Morrison finished the hallway and began securing his equipment. What would this involve? Teaching agents to see environments the way you do. Infrastructure, sightlines, vulnerability assessments. Things they don't cover in Quantico because most instructors have never operated in denied territories. The proposal represented a bridge between Morrison's two lives: the classified warrior and the community protector. It offered a way to serve without abandoning the quiet mission he'd chosen 35 years earlier. "I'll consider it," Morrison said finally. "But my first responsibility remains to these children and their safety." Park nodded, understanding that he was negotiating with someone whose priorities had been forged in environments where mission success meant more than career advancement. 6 months later, FBI agents attending Morrison's specialized training sessions would leave with perspectives that couldn't be found in any manual. They learned to read buildings like tactical environments, to anticipate threats from angles conventional training never considered, and to operate with the patient precision that had once made Morrison one of the military's most effective operators. But Morrison's most important work continued in the quiet hallways of Riverside Elementary, where a former Delta Force operator ensured that children learned and played in safety, protected by someone who understood exactly what that protection required. The tattoo on his wrist remained hidden, its significance known only to those with clearance to access records that would stay classified for decades. But the skills that tattoo represented lived on, quietly safeguarding communities through knowledge passed from shadows into light. Some warriors retire to write books or give speeches about their service. Others choose a different path, carrying their expertise into ordinary lives where extraordinary preparation makes the difference between tragedy and triumph. Harold Morrison had chosen his path long ago: service without recognition, protection without acknowledgement, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that his most important victories would never need to be explained because they would never need to happen. Have you ever encountered someone whose quiet competence suggested depths you couldn't fully comprehend? Someone whose service remained largely invisible, but whose impact was profound? Share their story in the comments below, and if you believe these hidden heroes deserve recognition, subscribe to help us honor those who served in ways we're only beginning to understand.